Guys, welcome back to another Bookhouse YouTube video. Today we got our top 24 running backs for week 8 of fantasy football.
And boys, before we get into it, we just partnered with SOBET. First link in the description. We're posting all of our exclusive content on there. We got trade for, trade aways. We're posting our primetime starts and sits. Go check it out. First link in the description.
And new number 1 running back this week, we got Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry, he has not been number 1 this year yet, but he has a phenomenal matchup against the Texans. He always absolutely kills them.
And at RB2 this week, we got Saquon Barkley. Saquon has been great all year, and he has a pretty good matchup against Seattle. We saw Eckler absolutely kill them last year. Good matchup, great play at RB2.
And in RB3, we got Jonathan Taylor. There is a little bit more unknown. It is Sam Ehlinger playing. Matt Ryan has been benched for the rest of the season. But again, hopefully it doesn't affect Taylor too much. Still has tons of rushing upside. Got targets last week. Again, new quarterback, so hopefully that stays the same. But great matchup against Washington this week.
And our first player in the next tier is Christian McCaffrey. Again, the Rams look bad on paper, but the 49ers always have a great run game against them. CMC is a little worrisome because you don't know what his role is going to be. It's only a second game in San Fran, but good matchup for the Niners. The Rams are good against the run, but as I said, the 49ers always find a way to get great rushing stats against them.
And next up, we have Alvin Kamara. Finally, after a horrible start of the season, he has been amazing lately. Benefited big time at the end of the last game, getting so many little dump-off passes. Got just under 20 fantasy points. And again, it's a pretty solid matchup against the Raiders. They have not been great against running backs.
At RB6, we have the hottest running back in the league right now. We have Josh Jacobs. He has been on an absolute tear. 3 straight games, over 30 fantasy points. Yes, the matchup may be tough. The Saints are pretty good against RBs. Last week, though, Benjamin did pretty well. Josh Jacobs is on an absolute tear. He has to be an RB1.
And the last player in this tier is Nick Chubb. Got a touchdown last week. Basically, when Nick Chubb gets touchdowns, he's going to be great for fantasy. Otherwise, he's going to be pretty bad. We saw that one game he didn't get a touchdown, under 10 points. But again, most games he scores. He has pretty good upside. He's averaging just under 20 points on the year. He has been really good so far. Bit of a tough matchup against Cincy, but he still should have a good game.
And our first player in the borderline RB1 tier is Joe Mixon. It's a mid matchup, but Joe Burrow's been on an absolute tear, and Mixon has been taking advantage. 3 of the past 4 weeks have been 16 points or over. If we look at his targets, 3 targets and 6 targets and 3 targets for 4 targets. If we're not playing on third down, that's solid PPR work. Joe Mixon has good touchdown upside, lots of scoring from the Bengals, and he's a solid RB1.
And at RB9, we have Leonard Fournette. Super disappointing last week. Under 5 points in what should have been a high-scoring game against the Panthers, who are pretty bad. But this week, going up against the Ravens, who are 19th against running backs. So it's a pretty solid matchup. Again, would have him higher if this offense was better. Tom Brady looks off. This whole offense just looks off. Again, he has upside, but the offense being so out of sync does lower him in the rankings.
Now, our next RB in this tier is Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce has been very solid. He's been on a good stretch of close to 20 points. Last week, he put up around 17. Pretty good. The matchup isn't great. The Titans are decent against RBs, but Pierce has been so good, he has to be an RB1.
Another player that has been so good, he has to be an RB1. Kenneth Walker was on an absolute tear. Put up 28 points last week. Had a 74-yard touchdown run. That is 13 points right there in that one run. And again, the matchup isn't great against the Giants. Giants were pretty good against running backs. But again, Etienne had 18 points on him last week, so they have proven to be somewhat susceptible to long plays, long runs to running backs. Kenyon Drake had some, Etienne last week. So again, there is upside for Ken Walker, and he has been balling lately.
And our last RB1 on the week is Rahim Moore. That may be a surprise, but he has taken over this Dolphins backfield. He's playing over 70% of snaps. Chase Edmonds is basically useless. Rahim Moore last week in a pretty tough matchup against the Steelers put up over 20 points. And who's he going against this week? The Detroit Lions. They let Zeke get 2 touchdowns. They let Pollard have a pretty decent day. Rahim Mostert's a great start this week for week 8.
First player in the elite RB2 range is Dalvin Cook. It's weird seeing him not in the RB1 range. He just hasn't been phenomenal this season. He played a lot of snaps last week, but again, it was basically saved by one long run. This week, going up against the Cardinals, should be a high-scoring game. He has upside, but again, with how mediocre he's been, can't really put him in the RB1 tier.
And next up at RB14, we have DeAndre Swift. We liked DeAndre Swift last week, but again, he did not play. This week has a decent matchup against the Dolphins. Not amazing, not terrible. If Swift does play, he has great PPR upside, has some touchdown upside. He is a great play for week 8.
At RB15, we got Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones finally had a good game. He was horrible for basically last month. Last week had over 25 points, 10 targets, 9 catches. Amazing week. It's a bad matchup at Buffalo. So that's why he's on an RB1. But again, like to see the upside again this week.
And next up, we have Travis Etienne. Rest of the season, we do have Travis Etienne top 12. But this week, it's a pretty tough matchup. The Broncos are good against the run. Etienne, though, with Robinson gone, should be the full bell cow. Gets lots of targets, gets lots of touchdowns. He's a great option.
Next up, first player in the next tier, Ramondre Stevenson. Ramondre was a lot higher the last few weeks. But again, with Damian Harris coming back from injury, does push Ramondre down, doesn't play nearly the bell cow role that he was those few weeks. And again, against the Jets, not a great matchup, not a horrible matchup, just don't love him as much as we did in previous weeks.
Next up, we have Michael Carter. On this season, we don't love Michael Carter with the Jets trading for James Robinson, but James Robinson's such a new addition. We don't expect him to have that much of a role. Michael Carter, when he's played over 50% of snaps this year and last year, has averaged 14 PPR fantasy points per game. That's solid. Yes, it may be a tough matchup against the Patriots, but the Bears RB last week did do pretty well. Michael Carter is a solid RB too.
Next up, we got Devin Singletary against the Green Bay Packers at home on Sunday Night Football. Should be an interesting game, and Singletary has been decent for fantasy lately. Had over 80% of snap share last week, 5 targets, had a game earlier in the year, double-digit targets. He's proven to be a good PPR back. Again, not an elite player, but pretty solid as an RB2.
Next up, we have Miles Sanders. The Eagles are versing the Steelers. The Steelers aren't bad against the run. They're also not great, but the main thing is we expect Philly to blow this game out. On betting odds, I think they're 10.5 to 11-point favorites. This game could get out of hand, and if it does, the Eagles are going to run the ball a ton. That means Miles Sanders should get a decent amount of touches in week 8.
And the first player in the next tier is Naji Harris. Najee has been super disappointing this year. He has basically been the textbook definition of mid. Not like unstartable, but again, not amazing. He's just the definition of a low-end RB2, and it's a tough matchup against the Eagles this week.
Right after Najee, we have Ezekiel Elliott. The Bears, they're going against the Bears. The Bears aren't great against RBs, and Ezekiel Elliott showed his upside last week, had 2 rushing touchdowns. Only could get 17 points, though. Tony Pollard's always going to be there, taking some targets, taking some rushing attempts, but Zeke is the goal line back, and he has a pretty good matchup in week 8.
RB23, we got James Conner. Had him so much higher earlier in the year, but injuries derailed him, and this Cardinals offense has been a complete mess. But again, D-Hop is back, brings some more stability to the offense, and hopefully Conner, if he's healthy, should have a role in this offense. Obviously, last year had tons of rushing touchdowns, always has that rushing touchdown upside, and it's a pretty solid matchup against the Vikings. We would not be surprised at all if it's a high-scoring game.
And lastly, our last player of the video is Dante Foreman. Him and Chuba are right back-to-back on our rankings, but we're slightly giving it to Foreman because of the Chuba injury. It's a pretty good matchup against the Falcons. As you see, the Bengals offense last week just cooked them. Yes, it was through the passing game, but the Atlanta Falcons defense just looked horrible. Foreman and Chuba had over 14 points at least. I think Foreman had 16. They played surprisingly well. Foreman's had good rushing yards. He's a solid play for week 8.
And guys, thank you so much for watching the video. Again, hit the like and subscribe. If you guys want to check out our exclusive content on SOBET, it's the first link in the description. Thanks again for watching. See you guys next time.